Hey guys, welcome to the very near future. As you can see, I'm back on the boat. We've been working our absolute butts off to catch up to nearly real time. You're only a few weeks into the future here. We're working our butts off so you guys can meet Lenny as soon as possible, and we've done that, so hooray! The birth story. Riley and I feel like we had a chat with Australian Birth Stories, the podcast, and we had so much fun on there, and we feel like we said everything that I would love for you guys. If you have the podcast app on your phone, you can click the link in the description below and you can listen to our podcast. If you don't have the podcast app, that's okay. I've made this video. It lasts for like 50 minutes and it's the audio of the podcast, so you can also just hang out here and listen to it. And I've also written a very detailed blog post, which is in the description below. So yeah, we felt like we didn't need to make another video saying it all again. We feel like we got everything out, and I think you'll really enjoy the podcast. Just to quickly add to that, my birth went nothing like I thought it would. You guys know I wanted a home birth with incense and beautiful music, and I got all of that for the labour. The labour lasted 36 hours, which you'll hear all about in the podcast. And then we had to transfer to the hospital, and looking back, like I wouldn't change a thing. Overall, I feel so empowered just having been through that, and I just, yeah, went into some deep places just trying to get through those contractions in the end, and I think it was a really good thing for me to have experienced, and I wouldn't change a thing. Rouse, I wanted to just ask you, oh my gosh, I'm doing my birth story video and I'm sharing the podcast we did because it was pretty awesome. But do you have anything to add? Like, how was the birth for you? How was your experience? What was it like when you saw Lenny for the first time?
Wow. That's as good as any. If life gets better than that, I don't want to know about it. I don't need to. The two things which I think about, which we do speak about in the podcast, are the difference between the environment that we had at home, which is very cool and chill, and there was music and it was really nice. And then we went to hospital, which was necessary, and they did a fantastic job. But just the different environments, all of a sudden there's clipboards and paperwork and people and lights and all of that sort of stuff. So it was good to have experienced both. And the other thing of note was sort of where different people's pain threshold ends, and when they're telling you, take me to the hospital. Like, Elayna never screamed, which was that was also difficult to help me figure out. So she said to me beforehand, I'm going to be in a lot of pain, and when I tell you that I need to go to hospital and that I can't handle it anymore, that's not going to be the time when I need to go. But at some point there is a time when it needs to stop, and trying to figure that out when you're me or the midwife, it's virtually impossible. So
yeah, because there's a stage that every woman goes through just before they give birth where they think they can't do it anymore.
Yeah, which is what you explained to me beforehand. But then you didn't have like a safe word. There was no like bananas. Like, this is really the time when you need to have it all stop. But yeah, it was all up. I don't know what superlative covers it best. It was very nice. I'm just breastfeeding, that's why the camera's all shaky. Alright, thanks babe. I hope you enjoy this podcast. In my next episode I'm going to talk about everything that's happened after the birth, the postpartum period. Yeah, cool. Thanks for watching, you guys.
In today's episode of Australian Birth Stories, I interview Elayna and Riley, and they take us through their pregnancy and the birth of their little boy, Lennon. It's a really unique episode, partly because we're doing Riley's involved as well and giving the dad's perspective, and also they had their pregnancy whilst living on their yacht and sailing around the world, so that brings another perspective, and they actually returned home to Adelaide to have their little boy. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you haven't already subscribed to the show, be sure to hit that purple subscribe button on your app now, and you won't miss out on any future episodes. But I hope you enjoyed today's show. Well, thanks so much for joining me on the show today, Elayna and Riley. We're doing a double act today. Do you want to just explain a little bit about yourself to the listeners? What you guys are up to and where you're living at the moment?
Well, thank you very much for having us, Sophie.
Yes, thank you very much.
So Riley and I, we met about 4 or 5 years ago now, and Riley had just bought a sailboat in Europe, and that's where we met. And he asked me to come sailing with him, and I agreed to go. I quit my job, and we've been sailing for the past 4 or 5 years now making videos on YouTube. That kind of became our full-time job somehow.
Dream job.
Yeah, it was a fairly long. It's been a good job, but it's quite challenging at times.
It is. It can be, but we wouldn't have it any other way.
Amazing. And so boat life sort of doesn't seem naturally conducive to children. At what point did you start thinking, oh, look, we're ready to start a family, or did you intend to fall pregnant?
Yeah, Lenny was planned. His name's actually Lennon. He's nearly a month old now. And yeah, he was planned, but maybe 4 years ago, we definitely wouldn't have brought a baby onto the boat just because we were so new to the whole sailing thing.
And it was a different boat.
But about a year ago now, or a year and a half ago, we got a new, bigger, safer boat, and that's when we started considering having a kid. I've been clucky for years. Riley's been clucky too, but he'd probably never admit it. And, yeah, we just decided one day to give it a go after, a year of joking about it. And, yeah, we got lucky on the first shot, and now we have little Lenny.
Very first try.
Yeah, we feel lucky.
Yeah, you feel like you got superpowers. I think my husband boasts about that. He's got us pregnant the first 3 times in a row. He's like, yep.
Wow, that's amazing.
Wow.
Yeah, so do you want to just take us through when you decided to try? I mean, not through the event, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I know we were talking offline about how you sort of naturally felt. Oh, sorry, I cut you off then.
No, I was just saying that could be for a different podcast.
Yeah, I don't have that rating.
A very different podcast. I think we crossed the Atlantic earlier this year in February, and when we had crossed the Atlantic, that was quite a significant event for us. Some things happened on that crossing that kind of just made us realise how precious life is, I think. Well, in my opinion, Riley, that's how I kind of felt after we'd crossed the Atlantic.
Yep.
And we arrived in the Caribbean, and that's when we tried. We tried in Antigua. That was the name of the island. That's where Lenny was conceived. And, yeah, I think that answers the question.
Yeah. But I remember you saying to me offline that you just sort of naturally felt straight away. You felt like you'd had conceived straight away. Do you want to just explain a little bit about that?
Well, this is crazy.
Sorry to interrupt, but generally I wouldn't acknowledge some sort of supernatural event or one of Elayna's crazy ideas, but she honestly knew just straight away. She came straight in and said, "Riley, I'm pregnant." And
day.
Yeah. And then got 9 different pregnancy tests until you got the positive.
Yeah, I knew I was pregnant. So on the day,
5?
oh no, it was actually 9 because I was sure I was pregnant. But yeah, I'd never heard about something like this, about a woman knowing that she was pregnant without actually taking a pregnancy test. But the afternoon of the day, I had this overwhelming feeling of energy, like I'd just drunk 10 coffees, and I couldn't explain it. And it was such a beautiful feeling that kind of overtook my body. And I looked at Riley, we're actually in the supermarket, really romantic, when I found out I was pregnant. And I looked at Riley and I said, "I seriously think I'm pregnant." And he just kind of brushed it off at the time.
Initially, I thought it was some sort of post-coital bliss. But it was a legitimate pregnancy.
So I Googled it, and I'd read about a bunch of other women talking about the same thing. So I thought that was pretty incredible. I guess being on the boat, you're kind of, I find I'm more in tune with my body living on the boat because there's less distractions and stuff like that. So, yeah.
Amazing. So did you then start kind of researching, how when you did get the positive on the test and it was all confirmed, did you then start working out, okay, how are you going to start doing like your initial blood checks and ultrasounds and stuff? Did you just start Googling away?
Yeah, so when we got the positive, straight away, the first on top of the list for me was just there's a thing called the Zika virus.
Oh, yeah.
It's a mosquito disease which can cause deformalities with unborn children. So we were in that area. So immediately I was like, "Oh my gosh, Riley, like I'm going to have to leave you and the boat. I'm going to have to fly back to Australia." But that was the first thing I started researching, and I ended up calling a bunch of people on the island until I got to the main man who was in charge of this kind of thing, and he said that there'd only been one case of the Zika virus on the island, so I could stay there temporarily. But that was my biggest thing. I had to call up every single island in the Caribbean to where we were going to be sailing to get these statistics. So once I did that, that's when I started Googling all the rest, all the logistics, where I was going to have appointments and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it ended up just being a case of rocking up to an island and knowing when I needed certain blood tests done and stuff like that, and trying to get an appointment last minute with different OBs and stuff.
Yeah. So we sometimes we'd go a little bit slower than we would have liked to have, so that we could stay in an area where there was a reliable doctor or something like that. But Elayna had done her research, and the weather was kind to us, and we didn't miss any appointments, I don't think.
No.
Yeah.
And being kind of in different countries and things, I'm assuming you didn't have like health coverage for different places. So did you just play cash and rock up? Is that how you did it?
Yeah, we did. And sometimes it was pretty expensive, but that's kind of just how we had to do it.
Yeah. Yep. And so the first test you had done, or the first ultrasound, you were still in the Caribbean?
Yeah, that's right. I think we had our first 9-week scan into the Turks and Caicos Islands. And for me, this is pretty special because I think it was the first time, Riley, that's when you really realised what was actually going on. You're like, there is a human inside my belly. When we saw little Lenny at 9 weeks old, it was so beautiful. Just, we couldn't believe it.
There was a lot of different points where it became more and more real. The first ultrasound, and then when we found out the sex, and then I guess there was one or two other things. And then for me, it was when I held Casey and Scotty's kid in our arms. One of my best friends had a kid
here in Adelaide, just before we did.
About 2 weeks before we did, or even just one week, and holding him in my hands. That was the last moment when it became very, very, very real.
Yeah.
For myself in particular.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
So we had the
beginning with the first ultrasound.
Yeah, the 9-week scan was in Turks and Caicos, and then I think we had a 21-week scan. No, we had a 17-week scan because we tried to find out the sex, but because we just couldn't resist finding out if it was a boy or a girl. And we had an ultrasound, and he was moving around so much that the doctor said he couldn't tell, but he had his suspicions about a girl. So we went home thinking we were having a girl for a month, and then I got a blood test done and we found out he was a boy. But my whole world changed when I found out, when we thought it was a girl. But I felt he was a boy from the very beginning. But, I got a 50-50 chance, so it's not like I have superpowers.
And so just with like the logistics of boating and things, I'm not across that at all, but so getting kind of test results and things, were you just kind of asking them to send them to ports ahead of where you were due and things like that? And how did you kind of connect with resources in that way?
Well, I think it was probably after the 17-week scan, I found a private midwife in Adelaide, because I'd been trying to figure out where we were going to have the baby. And to us, it seemed better for us to have the baby in Florida and to have our parents and like some friends that could actually afford to fly all that way come and visit us for that time when we'd have the baby. But the more I researched, the more I found that if you don't have insurance in America, the medical system is quite backwards, and we could end up having to sell the boat to pay for the bill, if anything, if I needed an emergency C-section or something like that. So we ruled out Florida, and then I got in touch with a friend here in Adelaide, which is kind of where we're based when we come back to Australia. That's where Riley's from.
Yep.
And I found Claire, who's been my private midwife, and after that point, she kind of told me what tests I needed, and then it was just a matter of finding the places to go and do them on our travels.
Yeah.
So, but we would get them to, a lot of the times we'd get them to email us the results.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And did you read any books or do any kind of online reading about what kind of birth you'd hope for when you did get back to Adelaide?
Yeah, I think the first 2 books I read were the Ina May books. And straight after I read those, I was so keen on a home natural birth, preferably drug-free, or definitely drug-free. That's what I wanted. We also watched a few documentaries online, Riley. Remember The Business of Being Born? Yep. I think that was also one thing that made you think maybe we shouldn't have a baby in a hospital. That's kind of...
Yeah, well, I mean, I was always happy to let you do it the way that you wanted. So, I mean, I agreed with you, but I was always going to let you sort of take charge of that.
Yeah, I just love the idea
Captain that shit, so to speak.
I can also add to that I tried to get into the midwifery program here in Adelaide, where the midwives are taking care of you, and I could have had a water birth at the birthing centre, but that was a very competitive program to get into. So unfortunately, I couldn't do that, and that's when I decided on the private midwife and having a home birth here in Adelaide.
Yeah. And did you just do kind of Skype consults with Claire, and she could kind of visually look at you through the webcam and help you kind of navigate any questions you had there?
Yeah, well, exactly.
A very good friend of ours is a midwife. She's just finished, and she recommended this lady Claire, who turned out to be fantastic.
Yeah, she was great. We clicked straight away, and our chats on the phone were hilarious. Like, we'd never met each other, but it's funny what you'll tell a stranger you don't know.
Straight into discharge and things like that. There's no like friendly talk.
Into the nitty gritty. Yeah.
It was certainly very eye opening for me, I can tell you that.
And were there any points where you felt like you felt a bit isolated? I know, like, sometimes you go through, kind of wake up in the middle of the night and you're not sure if you've felt a kick and things like that. And I guess anyone who's on land and closer to a medical centre could just go in and have a check and put their mind at rest. Were there any occasions where you felt a bit isolated on the boat like that?
Yeah, so there was one point where we were a little bit away. We're probably a day and a half from anywhere, and I'd convinced Elayna to go spearfishing with me, and she probably overexerted herself, which was, certainly partly my fault. And there was a big concern about we didn't know what might have been happening. We were still within range. We're in cell phone service, so we're able to fire off a few messages. And the advice that we got was to go in and see a doctor. And then so the time period from when we decided to head back to the hospital and arriving was quite stressful. And that's probably the most remote that we'd felt, I'd say.
I think that was when I was at 22 weeks. And what I was actually doing was dragging the dinghy in the water because I can't dive down too deep, being pregnant. So I was on the worst job ever, fending off sharks and dragging the dinghy through the water.
Oh, God.
Yeah, so that was my job, and I just what happened was I had a round ligament pain, it was quite consistent, which worried me and my midwife. So we had to go get an ultrasound. But that was the one time we felt quite isolated. But we're just so happy that's all it was. Yeah. But I was really stressed out. I spent the night crying, and Riley was just there comforting me. But it sucks when you just have no idea what's going on and help so far away.
Yeah, and then you just start Googling and making up your own medical assessments.
Oh, my gosh.
Exactly.
The worst thing ever.
What a wormhole that is. Yeah. Like, if there's anyone out there listening, please don't do that.
Yeah, don't Google anything.
And so after 22 weeks, what was your time frame of like when you thought you might head back towards Adelaide or be closer to home?
Well, I'd read online, I'd Googled what the latest time you could fly home being pregnant. So I think that was 32 or 33 weeks. They recommended that was the kind of cutoff time. So, I planned to fly home the end of September. And so I booked a flight. Yeah, that was the plan. And Riley had to stay with the boat for an extra month after that because it was the hurricane season. So basically our boat isn't insured.
Cyclones in Australia, hurricanes in North America.
Yeah, so Riley had to stay with the boat and I flew home by myself, which was such a sad day. Riley and I, we can manage quite well when we're apart, but this day we left, I was just overwhelmed. I cried all the way to the airport, the poor taxi driver.
And it's such a unique kind of lifestyle that you're living where you're just only seeing each other most of the time and you sort of haven't been separated. So you must felt like you were missing a limb when you were separated. Yeah,
I really did. I think Riley was having quite a good time.
No, but I really needed to look after the boat. You can't just abandon a vessel.
It's your first child,
at that
really.
time of year in that boat.
Yeah, and it's not just a boat; it's a house.
Yeah,
everything we love and own is on that boat. So I wanted it to be safe.
Yeah,
and I was okay, but every week that went by and those later days, I was just getting so much bigger. And every time I'd send a photo to Riley, he was like, "Oh my gosh, you're huge." Because I feel like I really grew a lot in those last few weeks.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Really don't tell me that. I'm feeling enormous at 29 weeks already.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know you were pregnant.
Yep. Thanks. Yeah. So, yeah, no, I'm just thinking, how much bigger can I get? This is out of control. Anyway. So when you so Riley flew back when you were 36 weeks, is that right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
That would have been an emotional meeting at the airport then.
It was, yeah.
Well, it was funny. A mutual friend of ours, Yosha, had been looking after Elayna, and they wrote these two girls. It was like I shouldn't say drunk. It was like they were drunk.
They're going to listen.
They were just having such a good time, and they rolled in a combi van, and they'd made up a sign for me, and they were having a great time. I wouldn't say emotional, and more just like fun.
Yeah, luckily I had a girlfriend come stay with me for a few weeks, and she kept me company while Riley wasn't there. Yeah. It was really good fun.
Yeah.
And so you sort of had visions of a home birth, and you had your private midwife book. So where were you staying at that stage?
Yeah, so one of Riley's friends he went to school with, they actually bought a boat, and they're doing the same thing as us. So their house was free, and they Airbnb it. So they let us stay there for this time. But it was really funny because I had to email them asking them if it was okay if I could have a baby in their house.
So my mates were losing it because they're just like, if you're reading the Airbnb report and it's like no smoking, no dogs, please no home births.
Don't flood our house with a birth pool.
Yeah, exactly. But they were so they felt really privileged to be able to help us out in this way, which we were just so grateful for. So, I was thinking about renting a birthing pool, but it made sense because there was only a few to hire at that time, and there were a few other births due. So I just bought my own birth pool, and we have had everything ready to go for the birth, and then we just kind of waited in our little Airbnb.
And did you do a hot water check? I know people often say they've had to buy like a new hot water service. Do they have hot water on demand, or did you check that first?
Yeah, I gave it a good run. I hopped in the shower one night. Don't tell the Airbnb people. But I hopped in the shower one night and just let it run for ages to test how long it would last, and it lasted forever. So
that wasn't an issue, fortunately.
It was a concern of mine though, because you don't want cold water in the birthing pool.
Yeah.
And you need a lot of stove space if you're going to try and be heating it with gas as well. So that we would have struggled to have kept up if that was the case.
And so you mentioned earlier that some good friends of yours had a baby, was it 2 weeks before yours? So you were sitting around waiting, and then they had theirs?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So a few of my friends have recently had kids, but it was when I met Scotty and Casey, they were actually in the hospital, and I was holding their little baby boy, and it was quite funny because he started crying. And I looked over at them, and my mate sort of shrugged his shoulders like, well, I don't know what to do. And I looked around the room, and we all started laughing. And we all said, well, I'm pretty sure no one here knows what to do.
They're first-time parents as well.
You should have all gone to one of those. I think they do now for the dads, beers and bubs, and they give you a bit of a heads up on parenting.
I actually sent Riley to one of those with Scotty, who's the dad of that little child we're talking about. Yeah, they went to a 2-hour one and loved it.
That's good.
It was really, really good. Yeah, no, I would highly recommend that.
Yep.
It just nailed home a few points, like how difficult it is breastfeeding, and
just how the dads can help out.
Areas where the dads can really help, like where if mum's, really tired breastfeeding and at night time and stuff like that, how we can help out with settling the child.
Yep.
And that should be something that we're
and he's been really good at that.
On.
You've been really good at that, settling Lenny. I always hand off Lenny to Riley when he's screaming.
We've had some epic battles, Lenny and I.
I'd say we're
50-50 at the moment. Yeah.
Yeah, colicky battles.
And who did a midwife run that, or was it a guy, or how was that done?
That was a guy. I think he used to be a pediatrician, and then and he just spent about 30 years around kids, and was really funny and extremely knowledgeable. The lesson sort of was just him just
handing out an obscene amount of information and us just trying to take it all in.
But the course is
really
run
good.
through the hospital. That's how you kind of got a hold of it.
Yeah. And I imagine, I mean, I've been with my husband to antenatal in the hospital, and the dads kind of sit there awkwardly looking at their feet in my experience. So I guess in a pub and all with guys and drinking beers, it's just more open for kind of asking the silly questions you want to ask.
Yeah. Well, it was funny because one of the places that Elayna and I were thinking about signing up to when we met up with in Florida, it was a fairly hostile environment.
This was a birthing center that we were considering having the baby in Florida.
Yeah. So we went in, and I just really didn't feel comfortable
being a man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was fairly awkward. So
she barely acknowledged Riley at all. And
this is rude.
Oh.
Really rude.
This is when we were doing a tour, like to see if we wanted to have the baby there, and she just couldn't have done a worse job. Like Riley was just so upset. After we left, Riley was like, "Did you see that?" Like,
yeah. So it was good for me and a mate to go to one of these courses and figure out exactly what we needed to do, and yeah, it was good.
Yeah. And what, Elayna, did you do any courses when you got back to Adelaide? Did you have any kind of training there?
Yeah, so I was doing some yoga at home, which isn't a course, but that helped out a lot with my pregnancy, just stretching and stuff. But I did a hypnobirthing course, which I was sure was going to get me through the labour at home in the birthing pool. And I really loved the hypnobirthing course, except I kept falling asleep in class. It was so beautiful, and the lady was playing like this music, and there was incense burning, and everyone was struggling to stay awake. So that something needs to change there, but it was a really good course in the end.
Yeah. So do you want to just take us through, I know we actually messaged when I think you thought you were in labour, and you're like, I think I'm in labour, and then I didn't hear anything for a couple of days. I was like, I hope that went well. Yeah. So do you want to just take us through when you thought maybe labour was starting?
Yeah, sure. So Lenny was due on the 1st of December, and it was the morning of the 4th at 3 a.m. I woke up to what I thought was stomach cramps. And I honestly didn't think anything of it for hours. I think it was when they felt consistent that I was like, hang on, this probably, like, I could be in labour right now. And I'd had 1 or 2 Braxton Hicks maybe a month prior to this. So I was kind of familiar with the feeling of a contraction, but not 100% on what I was going to go through. And so I woke Riley up at probably 5 a.m. just super excited to tell him that I was in labour, and he was really excited too.
You were fairly overdue as well.
Yeah, 4 days overdue. That's not too bad.
But you thought you were going early, so that kind of feels like 2 weeks then.
Yeah, exactly. I thought I was going to go early, and then the days just dragged on after that point. And then we spent the day of the 4th timing my contractions, and they never got closer than 5 minutes apart. And I'd notified Claire and told her what was going on. She said to give her a call when they were more like 3 to 4 minutes apart and they were getting more intense. And throughout the day, Riley and I watched a TV series in the lounge. We went for a walk around the block.
But it was still starting to get quite painful. It was uncomfortable.
Totally, yeah. I was like when we were in the house, I made up a circuit. Like I would labour in the kitchen, like bending over the bench, which was really comfortable, and on the couch I would do the same, and I would have a shower, and they weren't so painful, but it was enough that I couldn't sit down. I definitely couldn't sit down.
Yeah.
So that happened all day, and we went to the cafe around the corner and got a juice, and then by night time I really thought that we'd have the baby on the night of the 4th, and that didn't happen. That the contractions just got a lot more intense. So that's when I started listening to my hypnobirthing tracks, just to try to like get me through the night.
Yeah, and you also didn't sleep that whole night.
Yeah. So I didn't sleep the whole night of the 4th. And the contractions got a little bit closer together, but not really, but they just grew more and more intense.
And were you waiting to hop in the pool until like till the contractions were closer together, so you didn't set that up yet?
Exactly, but we did move all the furniture. So on the night of the 4th, we just moved Riley did. He moved all the furniture out of the house, and we made the space for the pool. And it was actually blown up already. We'd blown up the pool like a week prior because we needed to use Riley's mum's pump from that connected to her car.
Yep.
So we blew it up a week before then. So it was ready to go. We just had to roll it inside and put the water in. So, yeah, where was I? The morning of the 5th was when I felt things were really progressing. And so I called Claire, and I think the contractions were 4 minutes apart.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah. And so she came around at about 10 a.m. and
I was a bit tired by this stage because I hadn't slept very well. And Elayna hadn't slept at all and was in labour. And it got worse from there.
I told Riley to get some sleep because one of us needed some energy for the day. And I was fine. I was just pottering around the house, labouring, listening to my hypnobirthing tracks over and over. I think I had like 5 tracks and I just had them on repeat, and it was so good. Time went really fast.
So then the midwife rocked up in the morning, and contractions threatened to get more intense and shorter.
Yeah. And so I called Mum over at about 11 or 12. I think Mum got there.
Yeah. And we were sort of thinking, maybe 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock or something like that. And the midwife said, no, my bet's on 5 or 6.
When the baby would arrive, So we all put in bets, which was a terrible idea because once the clock got past 2 p.m., I was like, where's my little boy? He's got to be coming soon. So I think my memory is a bit fuzzy, but in the afternoon I had my first breakdown thinking that I couldn't do it. And luckily I'd done my research and read heaps of books. I kind of knew this was a stage.
And told me to expect it and to try and coax you out of it as well.
Yeah, I wrote it in my birth preferences to Riley. It's like, what did that dot point say? It was like, at one stage I'm going to cry saying I can't do it. This is normal.
Remind me of, to breathe and show me this dot point and remind me that I was going to do it.
Visualize Lenny's face and all of this stuff. And
that's right. So
I started crying, really thinking that I couldn't do it because I'd given it my all in the pool a few times, just completely surrendering. And
had you been checked? Sorry to interrupt. Had you had any checks from Claire at that stage?
Yeah, I think she checked me once before this point, and she could see that I was 8 centimetres dilated, which was I was really happy with that. I told her not to tell me if it was anything below 7, and it was 8. So I knew I was getting somewhere.
Yeah,
maybe I'm a bit hazy on this timeline, but this would be a rough sequence of events.
Yeah. Claire will probably correct me once she's listened to this podcast. Sorry, Claire, if this is wrong.
and your mum probably too. How was she coping seeing you in labour? That's always hard for the mums.
Yeah, I know. I was considering not having Mum there because Mum's a very emotional person, but she's just the most loving, caring woman, and I'm so glad that she was there to hold my hand. But it's funny because the second she walked into the house earlier that morning, she burst into tears, and I said to her, I was like, Mum, you are not allowed to cry yet. Please keep it together. But she was great. Yeah, she was so supportive throughout the whole day.
Riley, did you find it helpful having having her mum there as well? Because there's a lot of pressure on the dads to kind of be doing eye contact and doing all the things. Did you find it kind of good to have somebody else there to rebound off?
Absolutely, yeah. So I guess each different family will have a different setup or situation, but for us, it was amazing having Judy there. Like you said, I could sort of walk off and go and sit down in the room and regather my strength and think about what the next sort of half a dozen hours will hold and how I can help her through it and all that sort of stuff before I came back out, and really grab her hands and try and help her and listen to the midwife and try and let those messages sink into Elayna that the midwife was trying to get across. And just be there more when I was there and let Judy take over in the other parts.
Yeah. So after you'd had that sort of crisis of confidence and regrouped, did you get back into the pool?
Yeah, I had this burst of energy again because Riley had just said, babe, you've got to do this for Lenny. He just really just put all the energy back in me that I had none anymore. I hadn't eaten and I hadn't slept, so I was really exhausted and I was nearly ready to just be done. I just wanted the baby in my arms already. I just felt like I would never see our baby. I was like to Riley, when am I going to see him? It felt like it was forever.
So I think that was at about 2 in the afternoon.
No, I think it was later.
But this was before you started walking up and down the steps.
Yeah. Okay, so I jumped back in the pool straight after this, and I laboured for another hour and a half, and again I gave it my all, but then I could actually feel his head with my fingers in the pool. I just had a good feel, and I could feel something really hard, and so I knew like he was, nearly here, but it felt like he wasn't getting any further down the birth canal than that. So what we did was we had a feeling his head was in a funny position. So we tried to get him.
Is that OB?
Yeah, he was, what was it? Deflexed.
OP,
deflexed.
Occipital posterior, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's the position he was in.
So
and
his
so
head was
Claire
back the wrong way rather than curling in to come down. He was flexed back, like his neck was the wrong way, I think.
Yeah. That's it.
He was trying to, coming out crooked.
Yeah. So Claire suggested we do a few exercises to get him out of the birth canal so that hopefully, when I stood up the right way again, he was moving around and he'd jump back down that way in the right position, preferably.
Yep.
So we did all these exercises, some including like having my butt up in the air, my head on the floor.
Yep.
And
it was getting very pragmatic at this stage.
We
were massaging her and patting her on the bum and trying to coax Lenny back out of the birth canal so that we could line him up for the right approach. Yeah.
The hardest part was another exercise I had to do was walking up the stairs outside our little apartment, and I was contracting every 3 minutes at this stage, and I would just stop to have a contraction on the side rail, and that was the worst part, doing the stair exercises. I didn't want to do it, but I did. I walked up and down the stairs like 10 to 20 times, rotating my hips and trying to open my pelvis a bit more. And
trying to drop him back in position.
Yeah. So I laboured again after that in the pool, and still nothing, like he wasn't getting any deeper after that.
Yeah.
So then we did the exercises again, and then I think after the exercises again and a little bit of labouring in the pool, I had my second breakdown. Would you say, Ralph?
Yep.
Yeah, I said I couldn't do it again. I had a feeling he wasn't going to come out this way, and I wanted to go to the hospital because I didn't think I could do this.
And so this is a really difficult thing for the husband or boyfriend and I guess partner and I guess the midwife, because you know that you're not going to get through it all without having at least one breakdown.
Yeah.
But then how much encouragement do you give before you're like, okay, let's call it and try something else apart from a natural birth, So this was the second one, and we got through that, and I guess that led to the third one.
Yeah.
Riley, were you still feeling confident then with convincing her to keep trying, or was part of you starting to worry a little bit that maybe it was taking too long, or how did you feel confidence-wise?
Well, she was dealing with the pain so well. She was clearly in pain, but I had expected her to scream at me, be throwing telephones, swearing at me, maybe a bit.
Is that
of
how
a
you
punch
normally
up.
are?
I was ready for anything, and none of that sort of happened. So I was like, oh, she's got heaps up her sleeve here, she's totally fine. But I think that she was just dealing with the pain in her own way, and I guess
that's when my hypnobirthing did help.
Hypnobirthing, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So after the second one, I was still reasonably confident that she had a bit in her.
Yeah.
But that did take a lot more convincing than the first one, and then the third one.
And this was at 9 p.m. at night, I would say.
The third one.
Yeah, that was my last and final straw. I knew that nothing had happened, and I had literally given it everything I could.
So at this stage, Elayna had been awake for probably 38 hours.
I think it was 36 hours,
36 hours, and hadn't eaten and hadn't slept. So
my body was trembling, and I didn't have the energy anymore, I felt like. But I'd also had the gas at this stage. I don't think I said, but I knew Claire had the, what's it called, nitrogen oxide?
Yeah.
The laughing gas.
She had that in the boot of her car. So I think it was maybe 2 hours before the last breakdown, I decided I wanted the gas to try and help.
NOS bombs.
I decided I wanted the gas to help me get through. the contractions, and that gave me something to do while I was having the surges, but I don't think it really helped with managing the pain.
Yeah.
But gave me something to do. I was biting down on the mouthpiece and
so with the third
squeezing.
the third sort of crisis of confidence, I guess, for want of a better saying. Did you just say I want to go to hospital? What was your feeling then?
I said, this is it, guys, we're going to the hospital. And, Claire knows my birth preferences. She knew that I wanted a home birth, unmedicated. And I would have, I think I would have got there eventually, but it probably wouldn't have been too pretty.
Yeah, it was, so I tried to convince Elayna for a little bit, and her mum was going, no.
Mum wanted me to go to the hospital.
She was very much.
Understandably.
For sure. So Claire and I were sort of still wondering if maybe Elayna had a little bit in it, and maybe saying, like, do you think you can do one more?
I had to put my foot down. I was like, nope, this is it. We're going. Call me an ambulance. So they did. And the ambulance ride was really dreamy. I had the green whistle the whole way, which I'd seen on Bondi Rescue. So
I was wondering if I'd seen it on there, because that's the first thing I think of. Oh, Bondi, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's the only place I'd seen the green whistle, but I knew that I wanted it as soon as the ambulance rocked up. I was like, give me the green whistle. And I had a contraction straight away as soon as I got there, and I was leant over the bed that I was supposed to hop in.
And then they thought we were going to have it in the ambulance.
Yeah, so we thought my waters had broken, but I think it was probably just a bit of urine that came out, because, it happened in the back of the ambulance, and we were on our way, and Claire came straight to the back, because Claire was in the back with me and Riley rode in the front.
Yeah.
And my mum was in the car following us. But anyway, she checked me in the van, and luckily, I wasn't about to have the baby in the back of the ambulance.
And so it was really interesting for us, Sophie, having gone from the home birth situation where there was a swimming pool, we were playing music. There was myself and Elayna's mum there, trying to help Elayna out, and the midwife candles, and the midwife giving some, delicate guidance and information and techniques and all that sort of stuff.
Yep.
And then as soon as the ambulance arrived, there was green whistles and clipboards and questions, and then we got to the hospital and there was bright lights, and then we were in a room and there was 2 people and then 4 people and then 6 people, and then I think there was a dozen people in there at one stage, and they were all really wonderful people when they agreed with Elayna's, or they made sure to consult Elayna about each decision that was made. And
I was really impressed. As soon as we got in there, they'd read my birth preferences, and I felt like they had my back. There was 2 ladies in particular. I was like, oh, I'm safe. And we did have the midwife there as well, and we did feel safe being at the hospital. Oh, Lenny's woken up.
Cool. So you were just saying that Lenny's just having a feed while we do the next bit. But you were just saying there was a real shift in, obviously suddenly you're in a medical model, even though they were all very lovely, but it was a real shift in kind of experience from then.
Yeah, so it was having been there for both, having gone from the home birth situation to the hospital, it was interesting.
Yeah.
I guess we're able to provide a bit of insight on that, about the difference between the two.
Yeah.
And it was, they were clearly doing their job, but it is very clinical, and I mean the staff were fantastic, but it's just a different situation that you're in with big bright lights and monitors and so many people.
And time frames. Did you feel like you're on the clock for everything, whereas at home you were running your own pace?
Oh my gosh.
We actually did, yeah.
I couldn't believe that I'd been labouring at home for 36 hours, and then when I got in there, I asked for an epidural because I could not deal with the surges anymore. They were at the point. There was so much pressure down below, I thought I was just going to burst.
Well, I would have made you do that anyway. You needed it.
So I had the epidural. I was more than happy to have it despite everything I'd thought of before. So they gave me the epidural and they broke my waters, and Riley and I were able to sleep for an hour, and then they woke me up and they'd seen I was dilated to, I think, the full weight, or was it 9 centimeters? Well, it must have been 10 because they suggested that I start pushing. And I wanted to go on all 4s, and so they gave me the opportunity to try and push Lenny out naturally. And I only had a partial epidural. Is that what? where you can still feel most of your body.
I think they just turned down the amount of it.
Yeah.
So that you could feel more, so that you could push.
Yeah. I think I could still probably feel 60% of what was going on.
Yeah.
But anyway, I tried to push Lenny out naturally on all fours, and it was an hour and a half when the first doctor came in saying, like, hey, Elayna, you've been pushing for an hour and a half now.
Yeah.
I'll come back in and check on you soon. And I just couldn't believe, like I said, I was labouring at home for 36 hours, and then I'd gone in and been pushing for an hour and a half, and the time pressure was already on. It was just it was bizarre.
Yeah. And if I could just interject here, after we'd slept for an hour and I woke up again, I was tired and grumpy and all of this sort of stuff. And Elayna had been in labour for probably 37 hours at this stage and hadn't given birth. And I looked over at her and I was just thinking, oh my God, like, how on earth is she going to do this? She still hadn't eaten.
Thanks for setting the scene, right?
Well, I was just like, how is this even going to happen?
Yeah. So depleted.
Yeah, my body was trembling. It was crazy.
Had you been eating as well, Riley? Had you snuck in food for yourself, or?
Yeah. Oh, we had some food at home. Actually, we got Uber Eats.
Yeah, we got Uber Eats for the midwives.
Yeah, so you'd eaten. So they said, so he pretty much gave you another half an hour to push, did he, before he was going to try something else?
Exactly, yeah. The lady came back in at the 2-hour mark, I think it was, and then she said, we're going to have to start thinking about some other ways of getting him out. And that's when I knew what was going to happen next, and it was either the ventouse or the stirrups. What do you call them? The forceps. Yeah, not the stirrups. That's the thing you put your feet in, which are also just as scary. And then I think we all decided on the vacuum, and it was probably that's what she was suggesting.
Yeah. And were they talking about an episiotomy then as well, or were they happy to try without?
They read my birth preferences, and she just knew straight away that I would have rather tear than have an episiotomy. So that was great that I knew she wasn't going to cut me before I needed to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. But she did say if she thinks I need to be cut, she's going to cut me, and I agreed to that. Like, I'm not going to, Yeah.
So once the ventouse was on, how long do you recall how long or how many pushes you had till he came out?
It feels like, I think it was 5 or 10 pushes and he was out.
Yeah, it was really only minutes after that.
But my contractions had slowed to every, 4 or 5 minutes apart at this stage because of the epidural. So it took a bit longer, but he popped out and they put him straight on my chest. And it was really funny because I'd tried to get Riley to watch a bunch of birth videos with me on YouTube and stuff, but he'd glance over every now and then, but never kind of get into it, understandably. So he had no idea that Lennon was going to have a big lump on his head when he came out. And
he might as well have come out with 3 arms. He came out with this gigantic lump on his head, and I just looked at him and I was like, what is that? And I looked around the room and I was like, is that going to go down? And they're like, yeah, no, that's very normal. And I needed to get all of that sorted out in my, childlike, very slow brain.
Are you thinking, I didn't see that on the ultrasound, a second head?
Yeah, exactly. You didn't tell me you had 2 heads.
Yeah.
So it was very brief but very intense sort of feeling of horror. And then once
momentarily, I think it didn't last that long. They put him on my chest and Riley turned white and then started asking questions. And meanwhile, I was just, holding little Lenny, who was, all slimy, but he just had the cutest cry ever. It was every like 5 seconds he would let out this squawk. And I just fell in love with him that second he was on my chest, honestly. I couldn't believe we'd done it. I just felt like we were never going to get there, and at that point I was just so happy.
Yeah, and you'd earned it.
And then how was your placenta? Did that come out smoothly sort of shortly after, or how was that part?
Well, they suggested, because I've been in labour for so long, that I have the shot. I think it's, what is it? Is it an oxytocin shot? What is it?
I think it's Syntocin.
Yes.
I always get that wrong.
Syntocin,
Yeah,
you're right. Yeah, so they suggested I have that because I think there was a higher chance of hemorrhaging.
Yeah.
Is that right?
So the whole time that we were in there, they were sort of a little bit they were mentioning how long Elayna had been in labour for.
Yep.
Because that's obviously not how they do it in the hospital. So they were suggesting a bunch of different things, and all along the lines of because Elayna had been in labour for so long. And I do agree that she was fairly exhausted.
Yeah. And I did lose a lot of blood. I think I lost,
Yeah, you did.
I can't remember how much, but
Bucket loads.
It was a lot of blood, to the point where the next day I couldn't stand up and walk around. But I don't think many ladies can do that after giving birth anyway. But I was super lightheaded.
Yeah.
Exactly. They did some blood tests, and I didn't need an iron transfusion or anything like that. So that was good.
Riley, were you prepared for the amount of blood that you saw? Did that freak you out as well?
I was prepared for. I wasn't right in the firing line. I was sort of up around.
Yeah.
I was hugging Elayna, sort of thing, at the other end of the bed.
He did cut the umbilical cord, though. There's a really funny photo of him cutting the umbilical cord with his hilarious face, like both thumbs up.
But so I mean, I saw blood, but I didn't see everything, I guess.
Yeah.
I was prepared for blood and I was prepared for gore, but the only thing that I wasn't prepared for was my beautiful little boy coming out with a
double head,
with a gigantic basketball hanging off the top of his head, which has since gone down, and it's
he's got a very normal shaped head.
It's very spherical and all smooth, and it looks great.
It's funny because one of the midwives actually was born via ventouse as well, and she said to us, she was like, "Don't worry, I was born with a ventouse," and she like patted her head and like showed us how beautiful her head was.
Funny.
I went in to rub it to make sure. And then so Elayna got quite a bit of skin to skin time.
Yep.
And then she passed Lenny over to me, and I got to hang on to him.
Yeah, we got so much skin to skin time, and they did the delayed cord clamping as well, which was really awesome.
Yep.
And did you need any stitches, Elayna?
Oh yeah, I had to get 4 stitches in different places, and they were 2nd degree as well. So the lady, straight after the placenta came out, I got to stay in my hospital bed, and we held Lenny and stuff, but there was another doctor who came in and stitched me up, and that took her ages. She was actually quite funny. She considered herself an artist, and she was really getting into it. But I think they did a really good job, but I only feel like now, and it's a month later, that it's fully healed. But I'm still too scared to do anything. Like, I'm not going to touch it for a very long time.
Yeah. And your pelvic floor, how did that pull up after kind of 2 hours of solid pushing and then the ventouse?
Yeah, so that's the other thing. I actually haven't been able to feel when my bladder's full since the birth. Yep. I'd say probably a week ago I started to get feeling back. So I've had to wear the giant surfboard pads, which has been really fun. And, so I went and saw a pelvic floor physio, and she said that it could either be one of the muscle layers in my pelvic floor has temporarily paralyzed itself because of the damage done to my vagina with the stitches.
Yeah.
Or it could be a nerve damage from my bladder, the nerve that sends a message to your brain telling you that you're full. So we didn't know which one it was, but I have a feeling that it might have been a nerve damage, but I guess I'll never know. But it's healed now. I can tell what's going on. But that was really difficult and uncomfortable for a long time. I kind of felt like I couldn't leave the house or do a walk too far at all, and it was not too fun.
Yeah. And how has your breastfeeding journey gone?
I got really lucky there. Me and Lenny work really well together. But I think on the night of the 3rd, when we came home from hospital, it was the 3rd night. So we'd stayed in the hospital for 2 days, and we decided we wanted to go home just because we wanted a good night's sleep, because, the doctors, they're great, but they come in so often that you're awake most of the night getting your blood pressure done and stuff like that.
Yeah,
which
checking
is
in on you.
Really annoying for us. So we just decided to go home despite the fact that I couldn't feel my bladder and I was like a cripple, but we just wanted to go home. We did have Claire, who was our private midwife, so she was over every day, which was our support.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Breastfeeding.
The breastfeeding,
Even despite the fact that you and Lenny worked so well together, there's still been a lot of lack of sleep, and it didn't work perfectly to begin with.
Totally,
So I can only imagine how difficult it must be for
most women.
Other mothers out there.
I didn't realize
when it doesn't work so quite so well.
I didn't realize how difficult it actually is, and it's such a huge part about like the giving birth to a child. And I was so worried about the actual birth, and really like that's such a tiny part of this whole thing, isn't it? The breastfeeding is I should have learned far more about breastfeeding than anything.
So hard. And the initial, getting through that initial nipple trauma stage and kind of adjusting your skin and everything, isn't it?
Yeah, the hardest part for me was when my milk came in. Lenny just wanted to hop on my boob he was on my boob for 12 hours, and he just, I think he was really hungry, I guess. I'm not sure, but every time I would take him off my boob, he would scream his head off, and he was ferociously eating his hands. So I knew he was hungry. He was on my boob for 12 hours from 10 p.m. to 10 a.m. and I just didn't know what to do with myself. My nipples were red and blistered, and I didn't know how I could continue, and I seriously thought that would be the end of my breastfeeding journey. But I just pushed on through, and my nipples hardened up soon enough, and it's been fine.
He does this thing, it's really funny, where he'll get in close, and if the milk's not coming fast enough, or he's getting frustrated trying to latch on, he shakes his head really fast with his mouth open, like a fish that's been caught, or a dinosaur or something, and he gets really aggressive.
I'm sure lots of mothers have the same
just before
story.
and then he latches on like really hard.
It's so funny, aren't they?
It's crazy how strong that latch is, isn't it?
I know.
And you mentioned that he's been a bit colicky, and Riley, that's kind of your job after a feed to kind of soothe him. But how are you managing with that? Have you got a bit of a routine now with it, or?
Yeah, so it's actually evolved. The things that I used to do to settle him early, he doesn't like as much anymore. So I used to use my finger in his mouth fairly regularly, and that would always settle him. And now that still works, but not as much. Sometimes now I'll need to turn him upside down so his head's facing the ground and hold him on my forearm.
Yep.
And then just different things at different times. But also recently we've gotten this natural colic medicine from the pharmacy, and we give him 6 drops of that, and
after every feed, and
that's worked
brilliant.
Absolute wonders. That stuff is just fantastic.
I just feel so bad for him, he's like genuinely in pain, screaming his head off. And
you can tell that cry. You can definitely tell the difference in the cries. So when he is in genuine pain, when he's got that real colicky growl, he'll even wake up for sleep and just be in instant screaming mode.
Poor little thing. But I think it's getting better. This medicine's really helping.
Yeah. Well, as you say, what you did last week doesn't work this week, and then they totally changed the rules on you weekly, I think, if not daily.
Exactly. They just change so quick, don't they?
Yeah. And so what's your plans for the future then? Do you envisage taking him back on the boat, or had you planned that out before you had him, or what's your plans now?
So we're actually on a road trip at the moment. We've just pulled over on the side of the road.
Yeah,
here.
We're just testing the waters.
So this is our second little adventure with Lenny.
Yep.
And it all seems to be going quite well. So I think mid to late January we'll look at heading back over to the boat.
Yeah, we haven't booked anything because we just wanted to see how things were. We had no idea what it was going to be like to be parents, so we just wanted to give ourselves this time to adjust.
Yeah.
But we always said at the 6-week mark, after he's had his little checkup, and we've had our checkups as well, we'll fly back over to the boat, which is on the east coast of America at the moment.
It does take a long time to get anything done. Like if I thought it might take at the worst 2 hours to tidy a house and pack a car to go somewhere, it's not 2 hours, it's 5.
Yeah.
It's worse than double.
Yeah, it does take. That's the biggest thing for us. We had so much time for ourselves before the baby, but now that's half. But luckily our jobs involve traveling and making videos, and we're actually able to have the time.
Elayna's working so hard all of the time. That was one of the other things that we were concerned about, because she could be editing a video up to 8 hours a day, 3 days a week, plus sailing, plus, going from some weird island to go and get fuel from somewhere, or supplies or something like that, just to survive, living as remotely as we are. So we'll have to certainly slow down, but I think I hope that we've got as good of a handle as we think we do on this initial parenting thing.
Yeah, luckily I can edit and breastfeed. It's brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, there's pros and cons to working for yourself, isn't there? There's kind of never a downtime, and you don't have fixed maternity leave or maternity pay. You just keep working, which is good and bad.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But just leads me into, your videos. So if people want to connect with you and see your amazing clips of where you've travelled so far and what you guys have been up to, what's the best way to connect with you there?
Okay, so if you type into YouTube Sailing La Vagabond, that's where you'll find us, and you can find our other social media platforms from there. But on Instagram, I'm Elayna.Caruso and Riley's Riley.Whitelam.
Yeah.
And
pretty interesting
really interesting names.
handles there. Yeah.
But and I'll tag you and put some links in the show notes too. But it's pretty remarkable. You're kind of self-taught sailors, self-taught videographers and everything. It's really incredible what you've accomplished, and pretty much kind of I don't know, is that the right term, crowdsourced? But you sort of, the community has come together to support you in this way, and it's really amazing.
Yeah, for sure. And we'd really encourage people to head over and check it out. A lot of different people like our videos. We think they're
child friendly. Okay. We beat out the swear words, so if you have kids,
very
good.
We film lots of animals.
What's today's one? You've got an amazing clip of you under the water with like a Buddha statue or something. Where's that at?
Yeah, it's a statue in the Bahamas. It's what does it represent? Ocean conservation, and that was a 23 meter foot statue. 23 foot, 23 meter foot.
Amazing. Thing. I've tried not to show too many of your clips to my husband because he's Fijian, and I think he's going to try and put me on a boat. I don't know. I could fare well with 3 kids in a boat, but you guys make it look pretty easy.
Dear.
Well, keep up to speed with our videos. I'm sure we'll have a few tips for you on how to get it all done.
Yeah, and it's going to take a new kind of family-orientated twist now of how to navigate a newborn on a boat. So that'll be super interesting to see. But thank you so much for coming on. It's been great to have you. And Riley, thanks for being the first dad on the show.
There you go, Riley.
Yeah,
my pleasure. I didn't even know I was the first dad.
Yeah, but I've been talking
Thanks
about
for letting
for
me on. I really appreciate it.
No worries. It's really good to have that insight as well.
Thanks so much for having us, Sophie. And I just wanted to say thanks for the podcast and what you do. It's definitely the best. I've listened to a few pregnancy podcasts and stuff like that, and I really love your podcast over all of them. I'm not just saying that because I'm on your podcast. I've listened to all of them, and it really helped me get through my pregnancy, and I learned so much. So just thanks for what you do.
Thank you so much. Thanks. I hope you enjoyed listening to Elayna and Riley's birth story. It was so much fun talking to them.